Oh man, now close your eyes and listen to me. Imagine we are embarking on a journey through the mists of time to one of the oldest and most mysterious corners of human history. Where is this place? Mesopotamia, a fertile land shining in the warm rays of the sun. Yes, between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, we are going to the land of the Sumerians, one of the first civilizations of history. Here is a world where humanity took root, cities rose, writing was born, and gods walked side by side with men. Take a deep breath, because this is no ordinary place. The Sumerians, my friend, are not just people from the dusty pages of history. They are the first great step in human history. Imagine those first moments when the soil began to be cultivated, when the great temples rose into the sky. The ziggurats were like the Sumerians' prayer to the sky. Imagine lifting your eyes up and seeing these gigantic structures, clay staircases glistening in the sun, reaching up to the sky to be a little closer to the gods. And what about the people? Think about it. Who were these people? Where did they come from? Even this question is still a great mystery to historians. But what we do know is that the Sumerians took root here, in this fertile land. Legends tell us that they were drawn here by the abundance of rivers. But my friend, this land was not only full of blessings, it was also full of hardships. Every year, the rivers overflowed, making agriculture fertile on the one hand and destroying houses on the other. It was this contradiction that shaped the Sumerians' struggle for survival, but also their creative genius. Okay, imagine. They built huge canals to control the water. The richness of their land made their cities grow, trade and culture flourish. But let's stop here and think. Who were these people? What languages did they speak? How did they live? What made them different from others? To answer these questions, we need to dive deeper. So, my dear friend, are you ready for the story of this fascinating civilization? Believe me, the geography and origins of the Sumerians are just the beginning. Do you know what's next? Those cities, those magnificent ziggurats, those first writings. What kind of world did the Sumerians build? Now think for a moment. Can you visualize that moment when writing was first used? Stay with me to find out the answer. Here it is. Now close your eyes and imagine it. That unique valley where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow gently and give life to the fertile land. Mesopotamia. Even the name is magical, isn't it? It means the land between two rivers. But my dear friends, this land is not only a geographical wonderland, it is also home to one of the greatest secrets of human history, the Sumerians. Where did they come from, and why did they settle in this land? Let's dive into this magical story together. As first consider the geography of this land. The Tigris and Euphrates, like two strong arms, surround Mesopotamia, bringing life. The rivers overflow, then recede, leaving behind fertile alluvial soils. What is this but a paradise for agriculture? But this paradise came at a price. Flooding was unpredictable and life-threatening. That is why survival in Mesopotamia required not only courage, but also intelligence. The Sumerians had to be an intelligent and industrious people to meet these challenges. They dug canals, built embankments, learned to control rivers, and so they declared the triumph of human ingenuity over nature. But who were the Sumerians? This question has been asked many times throughout history. Some historians say that they were born and raised directly on this land. Others claim that they may have migrated to Mesopotamia from far away, perhaps from the depths of Central Asia. But one thing is certain: the Sumerians were the first true owners of this fertile valley. If you listen to the legends, it is as if the Sumerians came here as a favor from the gods. Imagine their first settlements, thatched houses all around, clay temples rising slowly. Perhaps it was here in this fertile land that the first cities we know today sprouted. The cities built by the Sumerians were not only living spaces, but also bridges between gods and humans. But how did this land shape them? How did geography and people influence each other? The vast lands of Mesopotamia, while developing agriculture, also pushed the people living on these lands to form deeper bonds with the gods and with each other. But my dear friends, the story of the Sumerians is just beginning. What about those magnificent cities and the ziggurats that towered over the gods? How do you think they came to be? Let's move on to the next chapter to find out. Now I am taking you once again to the fascinating lands of Mesopotamia. Close your eyes and imagine the majestic cities rising up on the fertile plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Sumerians did not just build a civilization in these lands. They created a way of life. They built an order. And at the center of this order were city-states. Don't these names still live in the echoes of history? And how were they born? How did they develop? These are the questions we're pursuing today. Imagine, my dear friends, for the Sumerians, a city was not just a place made of stone and mud. Every city was seen as the home of both man and the gods. Eridu, for example. According to legend, Eridu was founded by the god Enki himself. This city at the southern end of the Tigris is called the oldest city in the world by historians. Not only the lives of people, but also the will of the gods shaped life here. The sacred temples of Eridu were the center of rituals that shaped the beliefs of the people. Then, of course, there is Uruk. Uruk, perhaps one of the most magnificent cities of the Sumerians. Dedicated to the goddess Inanna, this city was also where Gilgamesh, one of the first epic heroes of history, ruled. Not only the city walls, but also the first written works of human history rose here. Uruk is known as the cradle of trade, art, and literature. Imagine the narrow streets echoing with the bargaining of merchants, the hammering of artisans, and the chanting of temples. And Ur, like a shining star in the south of Mesopotamia. The ziggurat in this city rose like a stairway to the sky. The people of Ur paid great devotion to Nana, the moon god. The city prospered through agriculture and trade and became one of the most important cities of the Sumerians. But my friends, not only the gods ruled here, but also those glorious leaders we call kings. Each city was like an independent state, ruled by a king. However, these kings were seen not only as rulers, but also as the representatives of the gods on earth. The structure of these city-states was so subtle. Each city had a god, a temple, a leader, and a people. Administration was organized to meet the needs of the people. Irrigation canals were built, levees were constructed against floods. Everything was for the survival and development of these cities. But, my friends, there is another subtle detail here. The functioning of this system was not only based on agriculture and trade. Rituals performed in the presence of the gods shaped the lives of the people. Everything was considered part of a divine order. But what was the secret behind it all? How did the Sumerians develop such a complex and successful system? Well, my dear friends, in the next chapter we will explore the incredible architecture of these city-states, their temples, and the role of the gods. Are you ready? And don't you want to find out how the world of the gods and the world of humans were intertwined? My dear friends, we continue to wander in the world of the Sumerians. Now I take you to the very heart of their life, to the most powerful bond that shaped their souls and minds, their gods and their mythology. For the Sumerians, gods were not just divine beings sitting in the sky. They were living, breathing forces that touched every aspect of life. In their world, the gods were everything. They were the owners of the rain, determined the fate of war, and even made the crops grow. Now imagine, let's take a step into the polytheistic belief system of the Sumerians. The gods, each with a unique power. Enlil, Anu, Inanna. Oh, you feel something just hearing their names, don't you? Enlil was one of the most powerful Sumerian gods. He was the god of weather, but he was not only concerned with clouds and winds. The Sumerians saw Enlil as the guardian of order. Enlil's will was needed to prevent chaos and to ensure that society lived in peace. And as story is told, they say that one day Enlil created such a storm to settle a dispute between the gods that not only the sky but also the hearts of the people trembled. And what about Anu, the supreme god of the sky, the father of the gods? When the Sumerians looked at him, they imagined a king sitting in the depths of the sky. The stars were the jewels of his throne, the planets his servants. Anu was not only the peacemaker among the gods, but also the one who gave people their destiny. But my friends, I must tell you about one of the most fascinating figures of Sumerian mythology. Inanna, goddess of love and war. She was both a delicate flower and a sharp sword. Her stories from Sumerian mythology still resonate in literature and art today. Inanna's descent into the underworld, what an epic story. When Inanna descended into the underworld to see the limits of her power, it was a turning point not only among the gods, but also in the world of men. Her courage shaped the way Sumerian society thought about women and power. Now, consider the places where these gods were honored. Ziggurats. Imagine, in the middle of a city, a huge structure rising towards the sky. This was not just a temple, it was the landing point of the gods on earth. Every step was sacred, every brick was woven with prayers. In these temples, the Sumerians offered gifts to their gods, prayed to them, and even appeared before them in rituals. At the top of the ziggurats, the worlds of gods and humans were thought to merge. Therefore, for a Sumerian, the ziggurat was not just a building, but a bridge to the divine. Ah, my dear friends, the mythology of the Sumerians did not only influence their own time. Their stories were carried over time to Babylon, Assyria, and even Western civilization. Even today, We can find Aphrodite in the story of Inanna, Zeus in the storms of Enlil, Jupiter in the might of Anu. The mythological legacy of the Sumerians is like an embroidery on the soul of human history. But now let me leave you with a question. Is the existence of these gods just mythology, or are they a cornerstone of Sumerian society? In the next chapter, we will take a look at the daily life of the Sumerians and how this belief system shaped their lives. What would your life be like if you were a Sumerian living in the shadow of the gods? My dear friends, I am going to take you to one of the greatest revolutions in the history of mankind, a discovery with which history was written, societies were shaped, and humanity was never the same again. Today we are going to talk about cuneiform, the birth of writing, and the extraordinary genius of the Sumerians. If you are ready, let me take you to those first tablets, and let's see how those first signs carried a civilization into eternity. Once upon a time, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the Sumerians were struggling with the complexities of life. Trade was flourishing, city-states were growing, and society was becoming more complex. This growth created a problem: remembering. Dear friends, think for a moment. Hundreds of sheep were being bought and sold. Crops from the fields were being calculated. The human mind could not carry this complexity alone. At such a time, a solution was needed, and the Sumerians found it: writing. In the beginning, everything was simple. The Sumerians began to engrave lines and shapes on damp clay tablets, small marks in the shape of nails. At first, these marks represented crops, animals, and numbers. Imagine, you could say wheat with one nail mark and sheep with another. But over time, these signs came to represent not only numbers but also words and even thoughts. So, humanity invented writing, which made spoken language permanent. This cuneiform was not just a recording system. For the Sumerians, writing was a miracle that touched every aspect of life. It was used for administrative work. Taxes were collected, trade agreements were made, and laws were written. Ur, one of the legendary Sumerian kings, even carved history's first written laws on the cuneiform tablet. These laws organized society, ensured justice, and ushered in a new era for the Sumerians. Trade. Trade. In the markets of Mesopotamia, the power of writing was felt. A merchant meticulously recorded the goods he sold and the payments he received. Writing not only kept the market organized, it became a bridge between merchants and cities in distant lands. With the help of writing, the Sumerians mapped their trade routes, secured their deals, and carried their culture around the world. And of course, cultural heritage. Through writing, the Sumerians passed down the stories of their gods, heroic epics and wisdom from generation to generation. The most famous is the Epic of Gilgamesh. This epic is considered the oldest literary work not only of the Sumerians, but of humanity. My friends, think for a moment. The Sumerians, who lived thousands of years ago, speak to us through writing. Their thoughts, their stories, their dreams, all on those clay tablets, waiting to meet us. Over time, Sumerian writing inspired other civilizations. Babylon, Assyria, and even ancient Egypt were all based on the Sumerian system of writing. Cuneiform paved the way not only for the Sumerians, but also for human history. Today we can see that these seemingly simple cuneiform signs are the foundation of modern writing. So think now, my friends, What would the world be like without writing? With this miraculous invention, the Sumerians built not only their own time, but also the future. And now let me ask you a question. How did this power that the Sumerians gained through writing take their civilization one step further? In the next installment, we will explore the fascinating achievements of the Sumerians in science and technology. Get ready, friends, because the world of the Sumerians is just beginning. My dear friends, now I am taking you once again to the fascinating world of Mesopotamia. This time, we will explore the unimaginable effort and genius of the Sumerians to survive and keep their civilization alive. Their deep connection to land, water, and trade changed not only their daily lives, but also world history. So let's begin to understand the extraordinary achievements of the Sumerians in agriculture and economy. Mesopotamia literally means the land between two rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates were the source of life for the Sumerians. However, these two rivers were sometimes generous friends and sometimes angry enemies. Floods during the rainy season and water withdrawal during the dry season made agriculture a great challenge. But the Sumerians used their intelligence to overcome this challenge. Oh, my friends, think about it. What struggles they went through to turn barren land into fertility. The Sumerians realized early on how important water was for agriculture. This is where irrigation systems came into play. They built vast canals, dikes, and dams to control the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates. This was not only an engineering feat, but also a marvel of social organization. Because these huge projects required the people to work together, large canals were dug and small irrigation ditches were dug through the fields. By distributing water evenly over the land, the Sumerians made their crops more productive. In this way, they were able to create fields full of crops like barley, wheat, dates, and vegetables. But, my friends, Sumerian agricultural genius was not just about irrigation systems. They carefully observed the seasons for planting and harvesting and meticulously prepared agricultural calendars. In fact, these calendars guided not only the farmers, but the whole society. And of course, the labor of the farmers was not unrewarded. Each harvest fed the community through taxes, both to the royal granaries and to the temples. Now, let's take a look at trade, my dear friends. The Sumerians were not content with their rich agricultural production. They established extensive trade networks by carrying these products beyond the borders of Mesopotamia. Just imagine, Sumerian caravans set out with their wheeled carts and cargo ships, transporting their valuable goods to distant lands. Sumerian trade was not just an economic activity, it was a meeting point of cultures. Copper, textiles, and artisanal products from their cities reached the mining regions of Anatolia, the mountainous valleys of Iran, and even as far as India. In return, they brought precious commodities such as gold, silver, precious stones, and timber. Dear friends, this Sumerian trade network enabled the transportation not only of goods but also of ideas. Traders from distant lands took back to their homelands the wisdom and inventions of the Sumerians, while leaving a piece of their culture behind. The Sumerians thus laid the foundations of the world's first global economic system. But the success of trade and agriculture depended not only on the hard work of individuals, but also on the organization of city-states. As much as there was cooperation between these cities, there was also competition from time to time. The Sumerians had to build not only irrigation systems, but also strong fortifications and strategic alliances to protect their resources and wealth. Now think about it, my friends. The rich agricultural systems and extensive trade networks of this ancient people enabled them not only to survive, but also to thrive. But the question is, was the Sumerians' interest in science and technology the secret behind their success? In the next chapter, we will discuss their discoveries, inventions, and contributions to science. Ah, my friends, the world of the Sumerians gets more fascinating every step of the way. Are you ready? Ah, my dear friends, I will now take you to another secret of the Sumerians that resonates centuries ago, their system of law and governance. Yes, the Sumerians did not only build irrigation canals and trade routes, they also sought ways to maintain social order. This order gave birth to the first laws in written history and laid the foundation for today's legal systems. If you're ready, let's dive into this fascinating world that reshaped justice, power, and governance. Maintaining order in the crowded city-states of the Sumerians was no easy task. Settling disputes between people, sharing agricultural land, organizing trade, all this required an authority. This is where the first Sumerian laws came into play. Oh, think about it. The pen of justice moved for the first time in these lands. The laws, engraved on clay tablets, shaped not only the authority of the rulers, but also the rights of the people. For example, the penalties imposed on those who violated field boundaries or the sanctions imposed on those who committed fraud in trade were determined to ensure justice. These first written laws, created to maintain order among the people, would later inspire great systems such as the Code of Hammurabi. But Sumerian laws did not only determine punishments, they also reflected the structure of society and its ethical values. When you look at the language of the laws, you can almost feel the lifestyle and beliefs of the Sumerian people. So who drafted these laws? Who implemented them? Here we need to take a look at the Sumerian system of governance. The city-states of the Sumerians were each an independent administrative center. In cities like Ur, Uruk, and Eridu, the ruling power was defined by different titles. Perhaps you have heard of the Sumerian titles En and Lugal. But do you know the deeper meanings behind these titles? Ah, my friends, let's discover them together. En referred to a religious leader. En was the guardian of the temple and religion. His task was not only to strengthen the bond between the gods and the people, but also to keep the community spiritually united. Given the importance of religion in Sumerian social life, En's role was crucial. He led the ceremonies in the temples, made offerings to the gods, and kept the beliefs of the people together. On the other hand, the title Lugal represented a more worldly power. Lugal literally meant great man, and served as a king or war leader. Lugal was the political leader of the city-state. His task was not only to rule the cities, but also to protect them. Lugal had to be a war leader, defending the Sumerians' rich farmlands and trade routes from enemies. But a Lugal's duty to protect his people was not just about physical security. He also had to ensure justice and look after the welfare of his people. This leadership system was like a key to understanding the complex social structure of the Sumerians, because both leaders, En and Lugal, met different needs of the society. Sometimes these two powers were united in one person, and sometimes separate leaders ruled the society. This was another beautiful example of how religion and politics were intertwined in Sumerian society. Now, my friends, close your eyes and imagine a Sumerian city. An En praying to the gods in the temples, and a Lugal watching the enemies from the top of the walls, each one fulfilling his own duty, protecting his people and maintaining order. This Sumerian model of governance was to be a source of inspiration for many civilizations to come. But can I end this story without asking you a question? The methods these city-states developed to govern and protect their people were truly unique. But was this order always peaceful? How did rivalries and wars between Sumerian cities change the face of this ancient civilization? In the next episode, we will discuss the Sumerians' war strategies and the struggles between cities. Get ready, my friends, because in the world of the Sumerians, there are traces of war as well as peace. Ah, my dear friends, I will now take you to the world of the Sumerians, a world full of wisdom and creativity. Imagine that while humanity was still in its infancy, the Sumerians were searching for ways to dominate the sky, the earth, and time with their great desire for knowledge and discovery. Yes, the foundations of today's modern world were laid in those fertile Mesopotamian lands. In this episode, we will explore Sumerian innovations in science and discovery. If you are ready, let's start this fascinating journey. The Sumerians were a civilization that made reading the sky an art. Looking up at the stars at night, these people were trying to understand not only the messages of their gods, but also the workings of the universe. I am not exaggerating when I say that the first astronomers were born in Sumerian temples. They watched the cycles of the moon and recorded the rising and setting times of the sun. These observations led to the first calendars in human history. The Sumerian calendar system was based on the movements of the moon and revolutionized the organization of agricultural activities. Imagine, the time of harvest or the flooding of rivers could now be predicted. This was a vital step not only in agriculture, but also in maintaining social order. As for mathematics, here too it is impossible not to admire the genius of the Sumerians. The Sumerians developed a number system based on base 60. Today, if we still divide our watches into 60 minutes and circles into 360 degrees, we owe it to the Sumerians. They used this system to make calculations, organize trade and agriculture, and even measure the sky. The geometric shapes and complex calculations engraved on clay tablets reveal the magnificent ingenuity they admired in mathematics. Imagine a Sumerian sage, perhaps with a simple stick in his hand, drawing shapes in the earth, trying to unravel the secrets of the universe. But we can't complete this story without mentioning the Sumerians' technological achievements, can we? One of the most important inventions in human history, the wheel, was born in these lands. The wheel was initially used to make ceramics, but the Sumerians developed this simple invention for a much greater purpose. Wheeled chariots revolutionized transportation and warfare, with the development of agricultural tools and trade. The Sumerians were able to spread not only their production, but also their culture. Even today, it is hard to imagine how the modern world would have been shaped without that simple wheel. Of course, the Sumerians' creativity was not limited to the wheel. The complex engineering systems they built for irrigation canals ensured that water was used at the right time and in the right place. Thus, barren lands turned into a paradise full of life. In addition, their ability to record knowledge with the invention of writing made it possible for scientific progress to be passed down from generation to generation. These technological innovations of the Sumerians had a profound impact not only on their own era, but on the entire history of humanity. So, my friends, what was the source of such wisdom and creative power? Why were the Sumerians so advanced? The answer perhaps lies in their desire to understand and make sense of life. They used science and technology not only to fulfill their needs, but also to be part of a bigger picture of the universe. But wait, can I complete this story without asking you a question? Why did the Sumerians' incredible advances in science and technology come to an end? What events led to the downfall of this ancient civilization? In the next installment, we will witness the decline of the Sumerians and the changes in the land of Mesopotamia. Are you ready, my dear friends? Because this story doesn't end here. The real excitement begins now. My dear friends, I will now tell you about that unique world where Sumerian creativity and aesthetics reached their peak. To me, the mesmerizing beauty of Sumerian art and architecture was a feast not only for the eyes, but also for the soul. These people not only sought ways to survive, but also to create artifacts that glorified life. Let's discover their artistic and architectural genius together. Sumerian sculpture was like the thoughts and feelings of an age engraved in stone, clay, stone, even bronze. They strive to immortalize gods, kings, and their people with whatever they could get their hands on. Perhaps their most impressive creations were the small worship statuettes, symbols of prayer and devotion. The statuettes usually consisted of figures with their hands clasped in prayer. These symbols of prayer and devotion, the Stoic adjectives, or the Sumerians believed that these eyes represented a constant connection to the gods. It was as if the gaze was saying, "We live here at your grace." Let's think about the Sumerian seals. These seals. Delicately carved cylinder seals with tiny stories on them. Many of them depicted scenes of gods, mythological heroes, or everyday life. When you rotated the seals on a clay tablet, it was as if the little stories came to life. It was not only a work of art, but also a symbol of identity, ownership, and authority. When you rotated the seals on a document, it was like a treaty with the world. But beyond their art, you can see the same splendor in their architecture. One of the Sumerians' most recognizable works of architecture was undoubtedly the ziggurats. These gigantic temple towers were both the home of the gods and the worship centers of the people. The ziggurats had a stepped structure, each step representing a step closer to the gods. The sacred chamber at the top was a place where only priests could enter. Priests would pray here, communicate with the gods, and seek their consent on behalf of the people. The trans-territorial fame of these structures proves how advanced the Sumerians were in engineering. Of course, Sumerian architecture was not limited to ziggurats. Canals, bridges, walls, and palaces, all of them show that the Sumerian people built structures that served not only the gods, but also their own social needs. These structures were built using stone and mud brick and crowned with rich ornation. The inner walls of the temples were decorated with bright mosaics. When the sunlight hit these walls, the interiors were transformed into a riot of color. The Sumerians knew that life was temporary, but they wanted their works to last, and they succeeded. These structures whispered their story to us, even after thousands of years. Think about it, my friends. Doesn't this subtle spirit in the art and architecture of the Sumerians show how they perceived and made sense of the world? The ziggurats rising to the sky are like a bridge to the gods. The tiny seals are a delicate reflection of the human spirit. However, we cannot help but ponder a question. How did a civilization with such an advanced understanding of art and architecture lose its splendor over time? How did the rich culture of the Sumerians disappear into the dusty pages of history? Here, my dear friends, in the next chapter, we will witness the decline of the Sumerians, the tremors of Mesopotamia, and the winds of change that followed. Are you ready? My dear friends, it's time to talk about the stories behind the majestic city-states of the Sumerians, full of jealousy, lust for power, and the struggle for survival. If you dream of a land where peace always reigns, you might be surprised by the cities that rose up between the rivers of Mesopotamia, because these lands were not only the scene of agriculture and culture, but also of fierce struggles. Let's dive into the Sumerians' wars, their military might, and the conflicts that shaped their destiny. The city-states that were the heart of Sumerian civilization were known by gigantic names such as Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Nippur. However, each of them was independent, and this independence was the main cause of an unrest among them. Imagine, amid each city-state had its own god, its own ruler, and its own interests. You can imagine how an argument that started with "my god is more powerful" could turn into territorial disputes and conflicts over control of trade routes. It was in these lands that the sound of swords and spears echoed, not friendly diplomacy. You know, especially the famous conflict between Lagash and Umma. It was as if these two city-states were bound together by an ancient rivalry. As the story goes, the war between them over an agricultural land continued for generations. In the midst of all this conflict, the Sumerians began to build their first regular army. Armies of spear-wielding soldiers, supported by chariots, terrorized their enemies. Those chariots. Rising on wooden wheels and shaking the earth with each stroke, they were a testament to the Sumerians' engineering genius. But internal strife was not the only problem of Sumerian cities. The vast lands of Mesopotamia were also an invitation for external threats. The Gutis, from beyond the mountains, or the Elamites from further afield, would organize raids on Sumerian cities. In the face of these attacks, the Sumerians tried to protect themselves by building strong fortifications. Think of the huge city walls of Uruk. Rising like a fortress, these walls were a barrier against enemies and a symbol of trust for the people. However, war was not won with walls alone. The Sumerians had also learned to form alliances. When the stakes were high, even rival cities would unite and fight against a common enemy. Of course, every war had a price. The economy would be weakened, the people would be worn down, and no matter how great the victory, the next war was just around the corner. For the Sumerians, war was a means of survival, as well as a necessity to protect their culture and their cities. But these conflicts were also one of the factors that led to their downfall, because worn-out cities become more vulnerable to external threats, and at some point the great Sumerian civilization began to fade from the stage of history. But now I cannot help but ask you this question, my dear friends. As the Sumerians struggled to survive in the shadow of the sword, what stories and heroes were born in the midst of these conflicts? In the next episode, are you ready to trace the Sumerian heroes and their legendary stories that shone in the midst of these battles? So, stay here to listen, and let's shed light on those ancient times of the Sumerians together. Ah, my dear friends, we have traveled together through the golden age of the Sumerians, their agriculture, their arts, their sciences, their wars. But now it is time to talk about how this glorious civilization came to an end. Although the story of the Sumerians is full of triumphs, discoveries, and glorious moments, history teaches us one truth: every peak has a fall. Now we pull back the curtain on the darkness behind the fall of the Sumerians and discover how their legacy was passed on to future generations. The Sumerian city-states ruled the fertile lands of Mesopotamia for many years, but this land was a center not only of agriculture, but also of ambition, greed, and the lust for power. The fall of the Sumerians was the inevitable result of internal strife and weakened city-states. The infighting of Lagash, Uruk, and other cities left them vulnerable to external threats. After a while, enemies not only knocked at the door, they broke through the gates. And this is where the Akkadians came on the scene. The Akkadian Empire, led by Sargon, conquered the Sumerian city-states one by one. Sargon's name is remembered not only as a conqueror but also as a unifier. But the price of this unification was that the Sumerians lost their independence. The Akkadians embraced the Sumerians' heritage, adopting their language and culture, but at the same time melting their power and becoming the new rulers of Mesopotamia. But the Akkadians were not the only cause of the fall of the Sumerians, my friends. Climate change, salinization of the land, and problems with irrigation systems also played a major role. The weakening of agriculture reduced the prosperity of the people and undermined the economic power of the cities. Gradually wearing down, this civilization eventually became unable to support its own weight. Although the fall of the Sumerians marked the end of an era, It actually ushered in a new beginning of Mesopotamian history. But were the Sumerians completely erased from history? No! Their legacy lived on in the other civilizations of Mesopotamia. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians blended the language, religion, and cultural heritage of the Sumerians with their own traditions. When you look at Hammurabi's code, you can hear echoes of the Sumerian legal system. When you see the gigantic ziggurats of Babylon, you can recognize the traces of Sumerian architectural genius. The Sumerians were not just a civilization, but one of the cornerstones of Mesopotamia. Ah, my dear friends, here we are at the end of another journey. Today I have taken you deep into the vast sea called history, into the unique world of the Sumerians. Together we discovered how this civilization, which sprouted in the middle of the fertile Mesopotamian soil, shaped human history. Their story is not only a reflection of the past, but also an epic that laid the foundations of our world today. First, we looked at the fascinating details of life in the city-states of the Sumerians. Do you remember how, in the middle of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, they overcame natural challenges to create complex irrigation systems that brought fertile fields to life? And how these systems revolutionized agriculture, their propensity for trade, the ties they forged with other lands, and the cultural wealth they acquired through this showed how humanity established its first global connections. Then we looked at the Sumerian legal system, forms of government and social organization. Remember the meaning of the titles En and Lugal, and how these rulers served their people both as protectors and leaders? It is still fascinating to think about how justice ruled society through the first written laws. In a world where we still pursue justice today, isn't it meaningful to remember these efforts of the Sumerians? What about the Sumerians' achievements in science and technology? Visualize those moments when they created the first calendars by observing the stars, and left their mark on history with their complex mathematical calculations. With innovations such as the invention of the wheel, they not only made their own lives easier, they laid a solid foundation for human progress. Of course, we must not forget their art and architecture. The majestic structure and function of the ziggurats embodied the Sumerians' world of faith, while their sculptures and seals conveyed their aesthetic sense and cultural depth. Each artifact was a part of their identity. And finally, we discussed the powerful armies and strategies of the Sumerians, from the rivalries between city-states to their methods of countering external threats. Every detail was evidence of their struggle for survival. But no civilization is eternal. The Akkadians and other external pressures brought the Sumerians to an end, but their influence continued to reverberate in the other great civilizations of Mesopotamia and in the modern world. Ah, my dear friends, today we journey together into the depths of the Sumerian civilization. We discovered many important details about this magnificent civilization, born in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, from its origins, the magnificent structures of its city-states, its rich religions and mythologies, the birth of writing, how agriculture and trade took shape, the fascinating works of art and architecture, the traces of wars and military strategies. The Sumerians were a civilization that left a lasting mark not only on their own time, but also on the development of humanity throughout history. Their irrigation systems and agricultural techniques not only increased the productivity of agriculture, but also laid the foundation for social order. The cuneiform script was the first written document in human history, enabling knowledge to be passed down from generation to generation. Sumerian sculpture and seals reflected their aesthetic sense and cultural values. The ziggurats embodied the Sumerian belief system as both the home of the gods and the spiritual center of society. Their war strategies and military might ensured the survival of these city-states, while also accelerating their cultural and technological development. However, like any great civilization, the Sumerians also collapsed under various internal and external pressures. The Akkadians and other external threats brought an end to this glorious civilization. But the legacy of the Sumerians had a profound impact on other civilizations in Mesopotamia. Their legal system, written laws, and understanding of governance became the cornerstones of later civilizations. The Sumerians' innovations in science and technology contributed greatly to human knowledge and helped shape the world of today. Now, as we turn our eyes to the future, it is important to consider how the legacy of the Sumerians still lives on today and influences the modern world. Their rich legacy remains one of the most important milestones in human history. But, dear friends, history always brings new questions and discoveries. What do you think was the greatest factor that enabled the Sumerians to go so far? What other civilizations were inspired by their knowledge and creativity? Perhaps the answers to these questions show once again how valuable the common heritage of humanity is. In the next chapter, we will delve deeper into the amazing achievements of the Sumerians in science and technology. Their genius in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering continues to amaze even today. Are you ready? Because there are many more secrets and inspiring stories to discover in the world of the Sumerians on this journey. Thank you for listening to this fascinating story. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so that we can take the next step in this journey through history together. See you in our next video. Goodbye, and continue your journey through the magical world of history.